Why is God silent today? Have you ever found yourself in a moment of deep struggle or confusion, crying out to God for answers, only to be met with silence? It's a question that many Christians have asked at some point in their lives. Why is God silent today? It can feel disheartening, even discouraging, when we pour out our hearts in prayer and God seems to remain quiet. We may wonder if He's heard us, if He cares, or if we've done something wrong. But God's silence is not a sign of His absence or indifference. In fact, understanding why God is silent can bring us a deeper, more intimate relationship with Him. One that is rooted in trust, faith, and patience. God's silence can sometimes be misunderstood as a lack of response, but it is often part of a greater purpose. It is in these moments of silence that God is teaching us to trust in His timing and sovereignty. While we may be looking for immediate answers or a quick resolution, God's silence reminds us that His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than ours. He sees the bigger picture, something we cannot always comprehend in the moment. The silence invites us into a deeper relationship where we learn to lean on Him not just for answers, but for comfort, guidance, and peace. God's silence can be a test of faith. One of the primary reasons for God's silence is that He is testing our faith. Just as gold is refined by fire, our faith is often refined in seasons of silence. In these moments, God is giving us an opportunity to grow in trust, to rely on Him even when we do not hear from Him in the way we expect. The silence can reveal whether our faith is dependent on God's answers or if it is rooted in a deep trust in His character, regardless of the circumstances. It's easy to trust God when we feel His presence, when we hear His voice clearly, but true faith is tested when He seems silent. During these periods, God is drawing us closer to Him in ways that we may not immediately understand. We may feel discouraged or lost, but God is using the silence to build our endurance, to teach us how to trust without seeing, and to prepare us for the greater work He has in store. Remember, God is always at work, even when we cannot perceive it. The Bible tells us in Isaiah 55:9, "As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways and my thoughts than your thoughts." This reminds us that God is working behind the scenes, even when we cannot hear Him. His silence is not absence. It's an invitation to grow deeper in our relationship with Him. God's silence can be a call to seek Him more. Another reason for God's silence is that He is calling us to seek Him more deeply. Sometimes when everything is going well and we can hear God clearly, we might take Him for granted. But in the moments of silence, God is inviting us into a closer, more intentional pursuit of His presence. He desires a relationship with us, and just as we need to communicate with Him, He longs for us to learn to sit in His presence and wait on Him. God is not silent to punish us. Rather, He wants to draw us into a deeper relationship where we desire Him for who He is, not just for what He can do for us. In these moments of waiting, God teaches us to become more attuned to His voice, to listen more carefully, and to trust that He will speak in His perfect timing. We learn that His presence is more important than any answer or solution we may be seeking. The silence gives us an opportunity to slow down, to be still and to seek His face with renewed passion and intention. God's silence reminds us to rest in His sovereignty. There are times when God's silence reminds us of His sovereignty, His absolute authority over everything in our lives. When we are in the midst of waiting, we are confronted with the truth that we do not have control over our lives. We can't make God speak on our timetable or dictate how He answers our prayers. This is a humbling realization, but it is also a freeing one. In the silence, we are reminded that God is in control, even when we do not understand what He is doing. His silence calls us to rest in His sovereignty, trusting that He knows what is best for us. Resting in God's sovereignty means acknowledging that God is in charge and trusting that He will answer in the best way possible. We may not always understand His plan, but we can trust that He is working everything out for our good. Romans 8:28 assures us that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Even in the silence, we can trust that God's plan for our lives is unfolding in the most perfect way, and that He will never leave us or forsake us. His silence does not mean He has abandoned us. It is simply a reminder to lean into His sovereign will and trust that He knows what is best. God's silence encourages us to develop patience and endurance. Patience is a fruit of the Spirit, and God often uses periods of silence to develop patience and endurance in us. When we ask God for something, we often want an immediate answer or a quick solution. But God's timing is always perfect, and He knows that waiting on Him can strengthen our faith. In the silence, we learn to be patient, to trust that God is working behind the scenes, and to endure through seasons of waiting. This builds our character and prepares us for what is to come. As we wait on God, we begin to learn that it is not the answers or the outcomes that matter most. It is the journey with Him. God uses the silence to teach us how to wait with hope and expectation, knowing that He will come through for us in His perfect time. James 1-3-4 says, "Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." God uses periods of silence to shape us into the people He created us to be. And through this process, we grow in our ability to persevere through life's challenges. God's silence is often a prelude to a greater blessing. Finally, God's silence can be a prelude to a greater blessing or revelation. Sometimes before God answers us in a big way, He allows us to experience silence in order to prepare our hearts. When God is silent, He is often working on something far greater than we can see in the present moment. He may be orchestrating events in the background, working on our hearts, or setting up the perfect timing for the breakthrough we are praying for. Just as a seed takes time to grow underground before it can sprout, God often works in silence to prepare us for something bigger and better than we can imagine. When God finally speaks, or when the answer comes, it will often be more than we could have hoped for. Our waiting is never wasted. God uses the silence to build anticipation, deepen our faith, and ready us for the blessings He is preparing. We are reminded in Isaiah 64-4 that, since ancient times, no one has heard, no ear has perceived, no eye has seen any God besides you, who acts on behalf of those who wait for Him. When we wait in silence, we can be confident that God is preparing something incredible for us, something that will bring Him glory and bring us closer to His perfect will. Trusting God in the silence. When we face God's silence, it can feel isolating. But it is often in these very moments that God is drawing us nearer to Himself. The silence is not an indication that God is distant or indifferent to our needs. Instead, it is an invitation to deepen our trust in His perfect timing, to seek Him more passionately, and to rest in His sovereignty. As we wait, God is shaping us, refining us, and preparing us for greater blessings ahead. Trust that in the silence, He is working on your behalf, and that His voice will come at just the right moment. So if you're asking, why is God silent today? Take comfort in knowing that He is still with you, still working for your good, and that His silence is often the prelude to something far greater. So guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. For more interesting content, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more awesome content. Have a nice day, and I will see you in the next video.